Well, I don't know how many years on this earth I got left. I'm gonna get real weird with it.
Hello, my beauties and bees, and welcome back to a new installment of Getting Weird With It. And today we are getting weird with a channel called Proven Conspiracies. Proven Conspiracies has a multitude of videos on a multitude of subjects. Operation Mockingbird, uncovering the shocking truth of Operation Midnight Climax, the presidential conspiracy exposed. The 5 president conspiracies from 1700 to the 1800s. Lots of conspiracy here. Gruesome war crimes exposed. Things like that. Today, though, we're going to look at a very specific conspiracy set regarding remote viewing. And the remote viewing experiments from the CIA, because I found a channel. This channel is called the Cryptid Huntress. It's a cryptozoology channel, but not like mine. Not from this angle, but from the angle of the host and proprietor of the show is a remote viewer, right? And I was in the side chat and I questioned them. I said, is there any evidence that remote viewing works in any capacity at all? And they suggested that I look into the CIA psychic spy phenomena, which is what landed it on the Weird With It list. So I'm more than happy to delve into the CIA psychic spy phenomena. And I'm more than happy to take you bitches with me. So let's do this.
Grab a seat because we're diving into one of the most bizarre, fascinating, and secretive chapters in intelligence history. The CIA's experiments with psychic spies.
Many people claim, and many others question, the existence of ESP, extrasensory perception.
Imagine this. The CIA...
I'm Barbara Walters.
secretive as ever, wasn't just relying on satellites, spies, or code breakers. No, they were tapping into something even more mysterious, the human mind.
This is Uri Geller.
In the 1970s, a handsome
Who remembers Uri Geller, right? The spoon-bending guy. He claimed he could do all kinds of stuff. James Randi trounced him.
Israeli Army paratrooper popularized extrasensory perception, or ESP.
Remote viewing, a technique straight out of a sci-fi movie, was used by the CIA and other intelligence agencies to see events, people, or places beyond physical reach.
Tonight we will examine claimed psychic powers and paranormal phenomena that have intrigued mankind for eons and remain the subject of controversy today.
This isn't just wild speculation. It actually happened, and we have the documents to prove it.
In a research laboratory in Brooklyn, sliced ping pong balls over a woman's eyes fill her vision with opaque light. All she can hear is the sound of waves crashing against a shore.
You're about to discover how the U.S. government explored the uncharted territory of psychic abilities, specifically through remote viewing programs, with some success stories that might just blow your mind. Let's rewind to the early 1970s. The Cold War was at its peak, and the U.S. and Soviet Union were locked in an intense game of espionage.
Let's see. Everybody remembers Uri Geller. Jason Jacoby, I do. Ember says spoon, which is also the Ticks war cry. John Fabiano raised their hands, and Natasha says, I remember him. Yep, Uri has resurfaced lately. You love so you woo. Yeah, we're gonna be doing lots of woo here. This is the wooiest segment of the show. Oh yeah, Dave, I was wondering, what are we wondering about? Oh, about him resurfacing. The golden days of the CIA when they were drugging each other with LSD, office pranks while trying to make a gay bomb. I don't remember him, but I was never interested in this kind of thing. I remember Uri Geller. He was good friends with Michael Jackson. I didn't know that. Cars also sometimes have electric slip differentials. Yuri is the new administration secretary of factual real things, bro, isn't he? Wouldn't be surprised if Trump gave him a cabinet position. Mind bullets. Yeah, we're talking mind bullets today. Yes, The Men Who Stare at Goats. This was based on. That movie was based on this. What we're talking about today. Uri Geller's just the surface, though. We'll get into it.
Soviet Union. The film tells of a Russian woman who claims she can move objects across a table without touching them by means of psychokinesis.
Intelligence was critical, and both sides were looking for any edge they could get. When reports surfaced that the Soviets were experimenting with psychic phenomena known as psychoenergetics, the CIA took notice. If the Soviets could use psychics to spy, maybe the U.S. could do the same. Thus, in 1972, the CIA launched its own covert program to investigate the potential of psychic abilities. They collaborated with the Stanford Research Institute, SRI, to study remote viewing, a process where individuals claim to be able to see distant or hidden objects using only their minds. While some experiments yield intriguing results, the field was fraught with controversy.
A year ago, we did on this program a week on psychic phenomenon. We did it very seriously. One of our panel members was Uri Geller, who is a young Israeli and has been tested by the Stanford Institute and by other scientists and is said to have psychic powers.
Let's talk about one of the most...
But did he, though? Or did he dupe the researchers?
famous figures involved in these experiments, Uri Geller. Born in Israel, Geller claimed he could bend spoons, read minds, and even stop watches with nothing more than the power of his mind.
In the early 1970s, Geller became a superstar, the most famous psychic in the world.
Okay, just to say, look at me. Visualize everything that you drew once more.
He quickly rose to fame in the 1970s and caught the attention of the CIA, who brought him to the Stanford Research Institute for testing.
It really was just sleight of hand, in cold reading.
In 1973.
In a room next door, a man is suspended in a contraption called the Witch's Cradle, his eyes covered, his earphones playing constant static.
During his week-long series of tests, Geller appeared to perform some incredible feats, such as replicating drawings that had been sealed in an envelope and describing hidden images without seeing them.
2 mountains with a round thing on, or 2 people.
Can I show?
Yeah, I'd like to. Am I wrong?
You're right.
I'm right.
The results were convincing enough.
Well, show us how he was right, because he's duping Barbara Walters doesn't impress me. Journalists, well, you expect more from journalists, but in the 70s, people believed in all kinds of nonsense.
The CIA to continue exploring psychic phenomena, but not everyone was sold on Geller's abilities. Here's where things get interesting and a little messy.
As a magician, I think that I'm uniquely qualified to expose trickery when it occurs.
There is the man himself. If you do not know who this guy is, this is James Randi, or the Amazing Randi, and he is responsible for basically putting a death knell in the New Age movement in the public eye by saying, "Prove it."
Occurs in parapsychology or in psychic claims, and particularly when it's self-deception.
While Geller was winning over believers, he was also attracting serious skeptics, none more vocal than magician and debunker James Randi.
Amaze me? The only thing that Geller could do tonight to amaze me would be to admit that he's a trickster who has tried to deceive a lot of people.
The turning point for Uri Geller came in 1973 when he appeared on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Now, Carson was no ordinary host. He had a background in magic and sleight of hand and was suspicious of Geller's claims.
Thanks.
I really liked Johnny Carson too. I remember, I have nostalgia for him from when I was a kid. But James Randi, I think that's the first place I saw James Randi was on Johnny Carson. I didn't know what was going on. I was so little when this stuff was happening.
We have only met...
This scares me.
This scares you?
Carson called in James Randi to help make sure there were no tricks. Following Randy's advice, Carson's team provided their own props, spoons and other objects that Geller wouldn't be able to tamper with in advance.
Well, we just got some things together here, and as I said, as you progress and do what you want to do tonight, well, you can tell us what you would like to try, and we'll leave it up to you.
I'll try when
Yeah, when your exhibition of power looks like parlor tricks, it's parlor tricks. Double-blind testing isn't exactly exhibitionist or flamboyant in any way. Yeah, I wonder how, like with Geller specifically, how rigorous their testing methodology was, or if they were just trying to publish positive findings to compete with the Russians.
I'll really feel up to it, okay?
The result? Geller struck.
Really feel up to it.
Tell us what you would like to try, and we'll leave it up to you.
I'll try when I'll really feel up to it, okay?
The result? Geller struggled. On live television, in front of millions, he failed to perform his usual feats. He hesitated, made excuses, and eventually said he wasn't feeling strong enough.
Garth, we are back. Uri was telling me you don't feel, what, strong tonight?
I don't feel strong.
It's so crazy to think of back in the day when TV show hosts used to smoke cigarettes while they were interviewing people. Isn't that wild?
A blow to his credibility. That night, skeptics had a field day, and it marked the beginning of Geller's long-standing feud with Randy.
Magical thinking, is a slippery slope. Sometimes it's harmless enough, but other times it's quite dangerous. Personally, I'm opposed to that kind of fakery, so I have no reservations at all about exposing these people and their illusions for what they really are.
He frequently demonstrated how Geller's tricks could be replicated using sleight of hand and clever misdirection.
A psychic who at one time was doing this sort of trick is no longer doing it because every 12-year-old magician has learned how to do it. And Miguel, not too tightly, very lightly, please. Just very lightly. It used to be done a great deal, but now the magicians and the kids are doing it too.
Randy didn't just stop at criticizing Geller publicly. He took it to another level, even writing the book Magic of Uri Geller to expose him. He referred to Geller as a fraud, and Geller responded with multiple lawsuits accusing.
Yeah, I remember trying to do the spoon bending when I was a kid, because my dad, he was an atheist. But he believed in this stuff. That's why we had both my parents kind of did. That's why we had all the Time Life books, psychic powers and mystic places and all that crap. That's why I grew up with those books and what led me down this path. But my dad actually had a family member. His name was Ciros. He did psychic photography. And my dad really believed in that. And he really believed in this spoon bending nonsense, too. So I remember being a kid, sitting up at night in our living room, watching The Tonight Show, Johnny Carson, and me and my brother both holding spoons in our hands trying to imitate Uri Geller.
Accusing Randy of defamation. One of the most famous lawsuits occurred in the 1990s when Geller sued Randy for calling him a fraud in public. The case dragged on for years, but in 1995, Geller lost. The court ruled in favor of Randy, not only dismissing Geller's claims, but also ordering Geller to pay Randy's legal fees. This legal defeat...
That was the thing, too. I didn't know that there was no spoon. That would have helped James Nordoff. That would have helped a lot.
It was a major victory for skeptics and reinforced the growing belief that Geller's powers were little more than stage magic.
You see, it's becoming very soft.
Se está suavizando.
And this is not an illusion.
Esto no es ninguna ilusión.
It's becoming like plastic.
Now let's shift away from the Geller controversy and get back to the real question. Did remote viewing actually work?
You spent a lot of time on Geller here for CIA psychic spy research.
Well, the results were mixed, but some cases were undeniably impressive. Take, for example, the case of the Chinese nuclear test site at Lop Nur in the late 1970s. Remote viewers, including some trained by the CIA, accurately described a nuclear device being tested at the site. One viewer, Mel Riley, described an unusual hourglass-shaped device, which turned out to be a crucial element of the Chinese bomb design. This information was later confirmed by conventional intelligence. There's also the story of a CIA remote viewer who pinpointed the location of a Soviet Typhoon-class submarine, a massive high-tech military asset, before it was even launched. These successes sparked real interest in continuing the program, despite skepticism from the scientific community.
And these things, it's like, okay, we covered Baba Yaga a couple weeks ago, right? Baba Yaga was a prophet, or she would make predictions about the future. The important thing about that is to be vague. Saying things like, an hourglass-shaped component, you know, you look over the whole thing and you can be like, okay, here's an hourglass-shaped component. This person must be psychic. When it's during the Cold War, making predictions about top secret military operations and things is not going to impress me. It's like biblical prophecies, like there'll be wars and rumors of wars, like always, like throughout all of human history, since as long as history's been recorded. No one asked the real question, though. How did Uri Geller bring the steel spoon into prison? Checkmate, atheist. Can't explain that.
Sort of like a highly classified black program inside of a black program.
Did I say Baba Yaga? I always say that. Baba Vanga. Yeah. It's a couple weeks ago. I did an episode on it, but Baba Yaga is different. That's a creature from mythology that has the big chicken walker house, and she's a witch.
Because you don't want the Russians or the Chinese to know what we're doing. And two, because a lot of scientists didn't want their colleagues to know what they were doing.
The idea of psychic soldiers and mind...
Swami, Godless Granny doing her Swami Mommy bit by predicting that tomorrow there's actually going to be air. We'll see if it comes true.
Indian experiments might...
Weather, she's doubling down on her predictions here. There's going to be air and weather tomorrow.
Sound like the stuff of conspiracy theories or science fiction, but it didn't stay buried in classified documents.
Sounds incredible, but it's true. Relying on now declassified documents, National Security reporter Annie Jacobson has written about the U.S. government's decades-long attempts to use Uri Geller and others like him for psychic espionage.
In fact, it made its way into popular culture, thanks in large part to John Ronson and his book, The Men Who Stare at Goats.
The goats had been secretly flown in from Central America to avoid customs. Special forces weren't worried about regular soldiers hearing the goats because they'd been depleted.
Published in 2004, Ronson's book
Depleted? Like so they couldn't bleat? That's sad. Don't do that to goats. That's like people who have their dog's vocal cords removed. What the hell's wrong with you? People have their cats declawed. They're removing the whole fucking knuckle.
Against the U.S. military's bizarre and often unsettling experiments with psychic warfare, remote viewing, and mind control. Title refers to one of the strangest claims in the book. The soldiers are being trained to kill goats by staring at them.
Kill the goats with the mind bullets. It's telekinesis, Kyle. How about the power to move you?
Yes, you heard that right. Staring at goats with the intent to stop their hearts with pure mental focus.
Goat Lab actually used to be called Dog Lab, but it turned out most soldiers didn't feel good shooting dogs in the leg. The Army, though, had long felt fine about doing stuff to goats, even testing atomic weapons on them.
While this may sound absurd, Ronson uncovered a wealth of strange practices and individuals within the military who were convinced they were onto something. Ronson's book doesn't just cover the remote viewing
Confirmation bias, is that what you're on to?
experiments we've discussed, but expands into the larger landscape of psychic research and fringe programs conducted by the U.S. military. His investigation paints a picture of the military that in the Cold War era was willing to explore even the most outlandish ideas to gain a strategic advantage.
This is Larry's spirit guide, Maud. I'm looking into the cupboard now, and I see a tin mug.
This investigation was so captivating that it was adopted.
That's such a funny movie. George Clooney's good in that movie. Yeah, Christy Nome would probably use mind bullets on dogs to save ammo. If you could do mind bullets, though, why would we? You think that we would have developed that during the Paleolithic as part of our hunting technique to be able to take animals down with mind bullets? How much easier it is to stare at a deer grazing in a field than it is to try to sneak up on it and stick it with a spear?
adapted into a film in 2009 starring George Clooney and Ewan McGregor. The movie plays up the absurdity of the real-life events, blending comedy with unsettling truths about how far the military is willing to go to develop psychic warriors.
Oh my gosh, we watched Drunk History the other night, and we were watching the episode about the dolphins. Oh, they gave them LSD. They gave them LSD, and this woman was providing sexual gratification for one of the male dolphins. It was wild, but there's this scene where Carl Sagan, played by Chris Parnell, comes in and does this amazing, freaking hilarious speech, and I thought BB was gonna die. I thought BB was gonna have a heart attack and just keel over with how hilarious that scene was. So if you haven't seen the Drunk History about the dolphins, go check it out. Folding into my ADHD brain, it's telling me I have 50 billion things to do. This is the time I need to listen to the voices in my head. Well, you have a good day, John.
The title refers directly to the goat staring experiments, though the film takes creative liberties pushing the story into a satirical realm.
See, I barely moved. Physics-wise, not much going on here. It's the psychic energy that's important. You okay?
Oh, sharp edges.
Yeah.
But as with all things that seem too good to be true, the CIA's remote viewing program eventually lost its shine. After years of research and millions of dollars, the results were deemed inconsistent. The program, under various names like Grill Flame and Stargate, ran until 1995 when it was...
There's actually been a couple interviews with the guys who did this about how they hustled the government research teams. They were like teenage mentalists who were like checking their gumption against the rigor of the CIA's investigative team.
Officially terminated. Despite his public setbacks, Uri Geller continues to make bold claims about his abilities. In 2019, Geller wrote an open letter to then Prime Minister Theresa May expressing his intention to use telepathic powers to stop Brexit and influence world events.
Just think
So Uri Geller decided he was going to stop Brexit. How did that work out for you, Uri? Oh, yeah, they jerked off the zooted out dolphin, the Gibson dolphin character in Johnny Mnemonic. Johnny Mnemonic is less out there than the real deal. Money grift, yep. Columbo episode. Columbo goes to the guillotine is about psychic military stuff. Also, the woman fell in love with the dolphin. Apparently, she did. Her name is Margaret Howe. She got married, had 2 kids, and they renovated her research lab into their home, where the dolphin committed suicide after they ended the program, and she wasn't allowed to spend time with it anymore. She lived with the dolphin. She lived in the same room. Her bedroom was the dolphin's pool was in her bedroom, because they were trying to work on language and communications with the dolphins.
Following, Theresa, bring us to a second vote. Go for a second referendum.
Uri, let me just jump in a minute. With the greatest of respect to you, you're not a British citizen, are you, or are you?
And it's September 2024.
It doesn't matter if you're a citizen of the country. You should be able to control their government. Ask Elon Musk, the South African apartheid baby from Emerald Fortune now has his claws into our Social Security and to our government funding, and he is apparently claiming he's going to make it more efficient. So you don't actually have to have any ties to the nation that you're trying to influence. You can literally buy elections now.
He wrote a long ex-post related to thousands of Hezbollah fighters injured in Lebanon when their new pagers all simultaneously exploded. He implied that it was a result of remote viewing. But here's where skepticism comes into play. While Geller may still insist on his psychic abilities, there's little concrete evidence to support these claims. His involvement with the CIA and the remote viewing program, while real, was always shrouded in controversy, and most experts agree that his performances were more showmanship than supernatural.
But Uri Geller's skills turned out to be unreliable.
Uri was telling me you don't feel, what, strong tonight?
I don't
Is that
feel strong.
As seen in this now infamous appearance on The Tonight Show in 1973.
So what are we left with? The CIA's experiments in remote viewing
I don't feel strong tonight, they say.
did yield some success stories, and they genuinely believed they were onto something at the height of the Cold War. But as the results became more inconsistent, even the government had to admit that relying on psychics to win the intelligence game was a long shot. As for Uri Geller, his legacy remains a complicated one. He was a major part of the remote viewing movement, but his public failures and battles with skeptics like James Randi have left...
He did the magic 8-ball, Jason, exactly. He shook the 8-ball and said, you know what, the results are not clear, try again later, or whatever they say.
Many doubting the authenticity of his abilities. Was he a true psychic, or simply a master illusionist?
The important agencies here are the national governments, other organizations, universities, research agencies that spent millions of dollars to investigate what was known as the Geller effect.
So what do you think? Was remote viewing a missed opportunity for revolutionary intelligence gathering, or just a wild experiment that went too far? And what about Uri Geller? Was he the real deal, or just a very talented performer?
They chose to believe that Geller was not lying to them when he said he had genuine psychic powers. He even said at one point that he got his powers, I hope you're ready for this, from the planet Huba.
Let us know in the comments.
You know what? I've been to Huba, and they say Huba Huba. But I am not surprised that he's saying there's some extraterrestrial source for his abilities. A lot of these people will say there's extraterrestrial, supernatural. They have spirit guides from beyond the veil, etc. James Randi got all kinds of excuses, like the type of lighting in the studio, etc., as the why he couldn't do the tricks under control. So many different people who have tried to step up to that challenge said that. I heard Huba Stank. I like Huba Stank. Didn't David Blaine show how Geller does his remote viewing, or was that someone else? A lot of people have trounced Geller's claims. All right. Where was it? I had another one. I thought this one was going to last longer, so I'm going to... We got 2 of them, which is good. Here we go. All right, here we are. And let me pull it on over, because this one, yeah. Here we go.
In 2016, a grainy video surfaced online, a haunting glimpse into an experiment from half a century ago. In it, a man in a white coat places a cat inside a transparent container with 2 mice. The scene begins as nature intended. The cat stalks its prey and strikes with precision. But then something inexplicable occurs. The cat's primal instincts seem to reverse entirely. It leaps wildly, retreating from the mice as though terrified of them. This strange footage barely scratches the surface of a much darker legacy. Decades before this video surfaced, dozens of unsuspecting civilians endured far more invasive experiments under MK-Ultra, the CIA's secretive mind control program. A mission
MK-Ultra.
So unethical, most records of its existence were destroyed. Still, through the few documents that remain, we can glean some of its horrors. Exposed. On December 22, 1974, A disturbing headline dominated the front page of the New York Times.
And the reason I wanted to cover this too is because there were like experiments and not just with ESP and stuff, but just with like controlling people's minds and behavioral control and stuff like that. We gave a cat pure LSD and it started freaking out for some reason, right? That's what it comes down to.
Stating, quote, huge CIA operation reported in U.S. against anti-war forces, other dissidents in Nixon years. The nation, already shaken by the unraveling Watergate scandal, was rocked further by investigative journalist Seymour Hersh's explosive revelations. Hersh, one of the era's most prominent reporters, exposed the CIA's violations, detailing illegal activities that included wiretapping private citizens, intercepting mail, and embedding agents to infiltrate anti-war movements. Americans were horrified to learn their own intelligence agency had begun treating its citizens like enemy combatants. Congressional inquiries followed, uncovering layers of government overreach. Yet, as shocking as Hersh's expose was, it barely scratched the surface. Behind the scenes, panic consumed the CIA. Fearing exposure of their darkest secrets, Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of classified records. Files were destroyed, evidence of countless covert operations erased forever. But a single misfiled batch of documents survived the purge, leaving a trail that would unravel one of the most sinister chapters in U.S. intelligence history. What emerged from these surviving
Also not to be confused with the gum Hubba Bubba, which is bubblegum.
Documents was far more insidious than domestic surveillance. Hidden in the shadows was a program of unimaginable cruelty, MKUltra. This clandestine project, spanning decades, sought to achieve mastery over the human mind. The surviving files revealed an intricate web of experimentation involving powerful hallucinogens, sensory deprivation, and psychological manipulation. Prisoners, psychiatric patients, and everyday citizens served as the test subjects, none agreeing or even knowing what the government was doing to them.
Yikes on bikes, right? I mean, that's scary stuff.
The battle for the mind. The origins of these experiments trace back to the aftermath of the Korean War. Returning prisoners of war, once proud defenders of their country, seemed to have turned into entirely different men. They came home preaching communist ideologies, denouncing the U.S. government, and praising the very regimes they had fought against. This eerie transformation left American officials terrified and trying to understand how trained soldiers had been reprogrammed. The answer seemed to be psychological manipulation. The CIA began to consider that a new type of warfare was being developed by the communist bloc, a battle to conquer the human mind.
They're using their psychic spies to defeat the U.S. agents.
Determined to counter this threat, the CIA launched Project MKUltra in 1953. At its helm was Sidney Gottlieb, a chemist and spy master who had come to be known as the Poisoner-in-Chief. The agency.
And yeah, this is the basis for like MKUltra and stuff. Is the basis for Stranger Things and Firestarter and all that kind of stuff. But I guess Stranger Things kind of mix of that in the Montauk experiment.
Spared no expense in its pursuit of mind control, pouring an estimated $25 million into the project, equivalent to roughly $250 million today. More than 80 institutions, from prestigious universities to hospitals, were covertly recruited through funding from organizations. In the name of scientific progress, MKUltra delved into this dark experiment. Test subjects, often unaware of their participation, were subjected to grueling trials that ranged from sensory deprivation to invasive brain implants. Many of these experiments were disguised as treatments for mental health issues, but were in reality trials to observe.
Imagine that, going into a doctor and being like, I'm struggling with depression or psychosis or schizophrenia. I need help. And they're like, okay, we're going to help you. But they're secretly just giving you LSD.
Of how the human mind can be manipulated, broken, and reprogrammed. Truth serum. LSD quickly became a cornerstone of MKUltra's experiments, a substance the CIA believed could act as both a truth serum and an agent of mind control. The agency began its experiments by secretly dosing civilians in public spaces, observing their reactions as they embarked on vivid, disorienting trips. One of the program's most infamous operations involved hiring sex workers to lure men into hotel rooms. Once inside, the unsuspecting targets were administered with LSD. Behind a one-way mirror.
Imagine that. You're like depressed. You're dealing with, psychosis or schizophrenia, and you go to get a hooker, and you're just like telling her, I'm depressed and I want schizophrenia and I want to get laid, And she injects you with LSD. So now you've been injected with LSD twice just trying to get some relief for your personal health issues.
CIA agents sat watching, documenting every moment as these men spiraled into hallucinogenic confusion. Even CIA operatives themselves were not safe. On November 19th, 1953, Frank Olson, a scientist at the United States Army Biological Warfare Laboratories, was administered LSD during a CIA retreat at Deep Creek Lake in Maryland. He returned home a changed man. Olson became withdrawn. He barely ate, refused to speak about his work, and confided in his wife with cryptic messages, stating, quote, "I've made a terrible mistake." The disorientation...
You reap what you sow, though, motherfucker. You've been doing that to other people. Like, at least you kind of, as someone who was familiar with it, at least, like, when you start to have symptoms, you'd be like, hey, wait, does somebody give me LSD? The motherfuckers in the hotel rooms with the hookers didn't have that. They thought they were losing their damn minds. We go to a sex worker for health care. Depends on what kind of care you need.
Followed Olson back to work, where his colleagues noted his erratic behavior. Concerned, the CIA arranged for him to return home under the supervision of a coworker. When Olson arrived home, he justified the situation to his wife, saying, quote, "They're afraid I might hurt you." Plans were made to send Olson to New York for psychiatric treatment with Dr. Harold Abramson, a CIA-connected physician. Yet this attempt to help Olson would go nowhere. In the early hours of November 28th, Olson plunged from the 13th floor of his hotel room window. Whether he fell or was pushed remains an unresolved mystery. Years later, the hotel manager reflected on the strange incident, stating, quote, "In all my years in the hotel business, I never encountered a case where someone got up in the middle of the night, ran across a dark room in his underwear, avoiding 2 beds, and dove through a closed window with the shade and curtains drawn."
So they giving him more? Were they dosing him some more? I was just joking about going to a sex worker for sexual healing, but I'm not going to pass judgment on anybody for their vices because I have plenty of my own. Captive Desk, are you familiar with Walter Ramin? He's a creationist with a background in magic. He claims that knowledge of magic allowed him to see through the illusion of evolution. Oh, I gotta look into that guy. Seems like a bad idea to put him up so high. Yeah. And he leapt through it. The thing that's about leaping through a closed window with closed blinds and everything. It's almost like he didn't know that there was a fall behind that.
Mind erasure. As horrifying as the LSD experiments were, these were but a fraction of the sort of obscure operations the CIA set in motion as part of MKUltra. At the Allen Memorial Institute in Montreal, renowned psychiatrist Donald Ewan Cameron conducted some of the program's most terrifying experiments, pioneering a technique he labeled as psychic driving. Cameron's mission was to erase the essence of a person's identity, reducing them to a blank slate, ready for reprogramming.
Winter Soldier. This is the Winter Soldier right here.
The process began with drug-induced sleep, pushing patients into unconsciousness for days or even weeks. During this chemically enforced coma, Cameron subjected his victims to ruthless electroshock therapy, administering currents far beyond medical norms. But the true nightmare of psychic driving lay in its psychological torture.
This is what our government did to us in the 70s. In order to experiment with psychic fucking powers. Holy shit.
Cameron devised loop recordings, monotonous, inescapable phrases designed to shatter the mind. Messages like, "My mother hates me," or "I am worthless," were played for up to 20 hours a day, endlessly drilling into the subconscious. To ensure there was no escape, speakers were embedded under pillows or strapped into helmets, forcing patients to endure the cruel messages non-stop. In addition to psychic driving, MKUltra also explored the depths of sensory deprivation, a method aimed at breaking subjects' personalities and inducing complete suggestibility. People were entombed in sealed, dark environments. Their hands were tied, and white noise was played in a loop to ensure the total removal of sensory input for months on end. The effects of these experiments were inhuman, leaving survivors in a state of irreparable psychological damage. Years later, one victim of Cameron's techniques recalled, quote, "There's so much I couldn't remember after I got out of the Allen. When my family came, I was a zombie. I didn't even know who they were." No one is
it's just so fucking cruel. Like, this is not how you do science.
safe. MKUltra carried on for decades until the program was abruptly terminated in the early 1970s amidst the fallout of the Watergate scandal. In the purge of official documents that ensued, any possibility to understand the full extent of the experiments carried out against unsuspecting civilians was lost forever. Yet the story didn't end there. The agency's fascination with the human mind and its vulnerabilities persisted. In 1976, the quest to decode the brain's mysteries led Dr. Barry Jacobs to conduct further studies on the effects of LSD, this time not on humans, but on cats. At Princeton University, Jacobs subjected the animals to aerosolized LSD in transparent containers, while observers documented the unfolding scenes. Through the clear walls, they watched as cats were introduced
Leave them kitties alone, you monster.
to enclosures containing pairs of mice. Initially, the cats behaved like natural predators, stalking with calculated precision and striking without failure. But as the invisible mist of LSD filled the enclosures, their behavior transformed entirely. The cats began displaying erratic movements, leaping at unseen threats, their pupils dilating as they reacted to imperceptible stimuli. Most striking was their response to the mice. The once confident hunters now retreated in apparent terror when their natural prey approached, demonstrating how
You think that looks like a mouse to that cat right now? That when it's hallucinating?
thoroughly the substance could dismantle even the most fundamental instincts. Human experiments had previously delivered similar results. At the Edgewood Arsenal, Army scientists administered LSD to soldiers, documenting its effects in a now infamous footage. Troops seemed to lose all sense of discipline, laughing uncontrollably, saluting the wrong officers, and stumbling aimlessly. A narrator, describing the scenes, remarked, quote, "They have ceased to be alert, but have become relaxed and carefree. They cannot control the impulse to laugh."
Is this your first time seeing someone on LSD, my friend? Because, yeah.
The CIA's ambitions reached an even stranger climax with Project Acoustic Kitty, an attempt to turn cats into living covert recording devices. CIA scientists surgically implanted microphones, transmitters, and antennas into live cats. A transmitter was embedded at the base of the skull, a microphone concealed in the ear canal, and a fine wire antenna was woven through the fur and tail to maintain a natural appearance. The objective was to create a stealthy operative that could slip into sensitive areas undetected, capturing conversations between unwitting targets. But the reality was something else entirely. Former CIA assistant Victor Marchetti described the project bluntly, stating, quote, "They made a monstrosity." The challenges were massive. Engineers struggled to miniaturize the equipment while
That's so fucked up. Jesus Christ.
keeping the cats mobile and inconspicuous. Training cats to follow commands proved a fool's errand.
Yeah, there's a reason why we use the expression herding cats. Herding cats.
After years of experimentation and a $20 million investment, the first field test ended in failure. Released near a park where two targets were engaged in conversation, the trained acoustic kitty could barely advance before it was struck by a taxi. Years of work and millions of dollars were destroyed in an instant. The future of mind control. As the decades passed, the public memory of extremist experiments like those conducted under MKUltra began to fade. Yet in recent years, advancements in brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, have reignited discussions about the once fantastical notion of remotely controlling the human mind. These devices, capable of interpreting neural activity through electrodes or sensors, have already reshaped the boundaries of human potential. BCIs now empower paralyzed individuals to control robotic limbs, enable communication through mere thought, and even allow people to play games with their minds.
Now that's super cool.
As the divide between mind and machine blurs, so too does the line between therapeutic innovation and exploitation. BCIs are no longer limited to simple commands. They can now decode complex mental states, including emotions, attention levels, and cognitive decisions. Such advancements open the path to potential misuse. In 2019, photos from Jiangnan Experimental School showed Chinese students wearing headbands equipped with BCIs to monitor their attention in real time. The devices reportedly fed live data to teachers who could instantly see which students were focused and which were distracted.
No, do not ever put one of those things on me. Never put one of those things on me. You do not have that permission. Plus, I'll probably break your equipment. My brain fires on a lot of different pistons at once.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency has begun to delve into a program aimed at narrative persuasion and behavior modification. The agency explored how stories influence the brain on a neural level, using transcranial magnetic stimulation to attempt to alter how individuals process narratives. While these projects were framed as tools to counter terrorism and extremist ideologies, the notion of a government...
Well, I seen it on just the page you just had pulled up, said it was for treating PTSD too, which is, if you could change the way that someone perceives their trauma to help them better cope, I don't think that that's a problem. So forming a popular arm insurgency or becoming a cat both can defeat the CIA. True things.
Capable of directly influencing how civilians process information is far from reassuring. These technologies keep evolving. Memories of the MKUltra days are resurfacing. However, today's tools are far more sophisticated, capable of penetrating deeper into the mind and manipulating it with a precision that Sidney Gottlieb and his team could only dream of.
Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they never stopped to think about whether or not they should. Who can name that quote? Who's that quote from? Yeah. So, the CIA, psychic research, Soviet psychic research, all comes up goose egg. It's a lot of sleight of hand and drug-induced terror. So let's not oversell it. Yep, that was Ian Malcolm. Y'all nailed it. But the human brain is a very complex piece of muscle and gray matter and meat and electrical impulses and hormones and chemicals that's just so complex and layered that we are not even scratching the surface of what all we can do to manipulate it. However, scratching the surface does enough damage as it is. So maybe we should just leave people's brains alone for right now. All right, so what do you all think of psychic spies? Are they real? Have you any experience with remote viewing, or have you ever engaged with a remote viewer? Do you believe remote viewing is even possible? Let me know in the comments down below. And please remember to be kind and take care, and we will see you next time.